Good evening, you guys. What a great day to be alive. It is 11/11/2021, and who knows when you're watching this. I hope that you're watching it live, but as you know, we always have these recorded, and we've got a whole data bank of webinars that are pre-recorded, recorded live, and you know that I do this because I love you. And I love to share my experiences, my knowledge, the things that I've learned with other people. I am such a why person. I am such a person that has to understand what's going on before I can make a really good decision in order to move forward. And sometimes that's, in the small things in life. And sometimes it's in the really big picture of life to say, unless I know why I'm going to choose this, whatever it is, diet, this lifestyle, I need to know what it's going to do. I need to know why I'm going to need to do that before I'm truly going to put my time and energy into it. So I love to put these webinars together to help educate people, to help empower them, for them to make better decisions. And we're going to talk about some really simple, I'm going to call them simple concepts that aren't always easy, because the way that we're raised is going to affect this. Our previous beliefs are really going to affect how we look at health and how we look at symptoms, which we're going to chat a little bit about, and what we're willing to do moving forward. Because I've got to tell you, I didn't come from a natural minded family. I didn't come from one that was, all about finding out why or anything like that. It was more of like, do what the doctor says, and here's what you do, and here's your prescription, and go. And not really getting the big picture, which I want to share with you guys today, getting that big picture, the long-term, what consequence does this have on my long-term health, on my long-term outcome? And I hope I can tie some of those pieces together for you guys tonight, and then just give you some more of the encouragement that you need to be able to make some really good choices. So we're probably going to, I'm hoping for some people are already, I'm trying to move my head a little bit smaller here so you don't have to stare at my face all the time. I'm hoping some of you are already on this natural healthcare track, or you probably wouldn't be registered for it. I know a lot of the people I saw registered tonight are patients already. So this is really exciting. And this is always helpful to take this to the next level and understanding of what's going on. But I really do want to give you some big concepts so you can look long-term, and then also help you make those day-to-day decisions on what's going on in your life when you understand a little bit more. And I feel like it's really exciting when people become, stronger in who they are and making their choices, and then knowing that every one of those choices really does pay off in the long run, or it has a consequence at some point, whether it's a good or bad consequence, I guess. I know growing up, and this is many of us, because I've lived through 2020 with you guys, when you are sick, what that means to you. I'm going to move my microphone a little bit closer. I don't know if you guys can hear me or not, but I'm going to try not to mess things up while I do this. Yep, already did. What that means, because often if there's a symptom and somebody is expressing what we would call a symptom, then often we are like, oh my gosh, red flag, what's going on? What should I do about this? We have to turn it off. And we're going to talk about why that's actually a healthy response, and why it's a good thing to have a symptom when something gets in. What we don't want is, of course, to always have our immune system on. We're going to talk about the consequence of that as well, when we're just like constantly battling something over and over and over again, and what that can look like as well. And even in some of my other previous webinars, we break down some of these other concepts further. I'm not going to keep you guys here too late tonight, because goes with my next slide. We've got limited energy. We've got limited time and energy in our lives. So some of those other webinars you can look at if you really, really love to get deeper in some of this stuff. I talk a lot about some of these other concepts as well, but with this energy one, it's huge for me. I say we have limited time too, but we actually just have limited attention. There's times where the time's going by and you just aren't actually focusing on something. But the limited energy is so true in every single aspect of our life. And it's really, really true in our body. So when we're taking a big picture of what's going on, our body has limited energy throughout the days, weeks, months, years, our whole life. And of course, our lifestyle is really going to be a huge factor in that, and what we choose to put in our bodies, on our bodies, that's going to be major. I mean, many of you are on here know about, toxin-free living and mindfulness and things like that, moving your body, of course, with exercise. But your body has a capacity for some things, and some things it doesn't. We're going to talk about when we don't have the energy for things, but really when you're looking at the body throughout the day, what you're doing is running two different systems. You've heard me talk before, so you know that your brain's in control of everything. Your central nervous system is what communicates between the brain and the body. And we are looking at that in the office all the time to say, okay, is there clear and concise communication here? Where's the stress? Is it accumulating? Is it interfering with our natural body processes? And if it is, that is our job as chiropractors to remove that, help the body restore itself, heal itself, which means to be made whole, not to cure, but to be made whole, which is such a beautiful thing. And then at home, your job is, okay, get the body stronger, build it up. And sometimes that means you don't necessarily know how to do that. And these webinars help us, having conversations with us help us. But I feel like this one's going to be really, really key, especially moving into November, December, January, February, because I say choose your stress wisely. And that doesn't mean eating going to every Christmas party and eating all of the, goodies and the wine and all of the things, because it can be really, really exhausting. So here's what I'm talking about with limited energy. Your body during the day largely is focusing on being awake, alert, alive, and fighting gravity, if you believe it or not, to be able to move your body through time and space and to move that larger motor system. That is typically what's going on during the day. And of course, you're learning, you're living life through all of the senses. The energy is put there. Your fight or flight response, that sympathetic nervous system response, isn't a bad thing. It's a great, wonderful, innate response that says, hey, I need to respond to this stressor. And it should turn on, handle the stress, turn back off. So we don't want to live in fight or flight, but it is a beautiful thing to have. Exercise is fight or flight. We don't live there forever because we know how much that drains our battery. Having an argument is fight or flight. We don't want to do that all day long because we know it drains our battery. It is designed to be short-lived. Then at night, all of the energy goes to the core. It goes to our internal organs and glands, and it allows our body to heal. You turn off that motor system, at least you should. For our restful sleepers, you should turn off the fight or flight. You turn off that thinking part of your brain. The energy goes to the core to heal and repair from the day, to learn what was going on. There's growth that, of course, is going on during kids. So you're flipping between sympathetic and parasympathetic. Now, during the day where you're just kind of peacefully at rest, you should really be balanced between the two. Neither should be triggered, which is why we run a test to see where you're at. But your parasympathetic nervous system has to have time to do its job, and your nervous system or your immune system lies within that parasympathetic nervous system. So we can already tell before I keep continuing down these slides, if you're stuck in fight or flight, your parasympathetic nervous system doesn't have a chance. And the more you're starting to drain your battery, if you're like, oh yeah, man, my life is stressed, like I'm draining my own battery, of course, we know we're going to start missing out on parasympathetic nervous system activity. I've got my little nerve chart up here just because I think it gives people a really good idea of what's going on inside the body. And if you're on a cell phone, you probably can't see this, but it's just showing how inversely proportional this sympathetic nervous system is compared to the parasympathetic nervous system. They do the complete opposite thing. I need some water. I must be way too excited. It does completely the opposite. So you can't be accelerating your heart rate and decelerating at the same time. You can't be increasing digestion and decreasing at the same time. Completely inversely proportional. And the reason I like to point this out is because it just shows how many nerve roots are controlling the sympathetic nervous system, how easily that thing is just wham, triggered. And then when you're looking at parasympathetic, how it's in control and what's going on and how closely related it is to the brain and your vagus nerve, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, and what's going on there and some of your immune response inside of your brain and what happens when that is imbalanced as well. So I feel like this is such an important slide to be able to look at. I mean, I guess I'm kind of sciencey, so I like to see that physically and know just exactly what's happening inside of the body. I really actually wish, you know, when I look at the bladder, I'm like, man, could we like not contract the bladder at night in parasympathetic? I mean, I'd really like to sleep during the night. That'd be an excellent thing. But I want to look a little closer at stress as well. This poster, I'm sure you've seen up in our office, when we're looking at if sympathetic is gas and parasympathetic is brakes, you can see just how easily and quickly we can start adding up stress in our lives. And it comes in three forms: physical, chemical, and emotional. We call them the three T's: thoughts, traumas, and toxins. I'm sure you've heard this before. You can imagine the more we have during the day, the more we're asking out of that sympathetic nervous system, the more we start draining our battery, and the less chance typically that parasympathetic nervous system has to kick on and to heal. And once again, you know, I have webinars on these, and you guys, I have something very exciting happening here December 2nd with emotional resilience and talking about the thoughts and the emotional stress. Well, you don't have to talk about your thoughts and your emotional stress, but working you through it and how to help with that. So keep that on your calendar. The physical stress and trauma, a lot of people think about themselves or their kids falling, tripping, having accidents, car accidents. And sometimes some of them are very traumatic. And indeed, it really adds up inside of the body. But one of the things that many people don't think about as trauma, physically traumatic, is number one, not moving your body enough, the sedentary lifestyle, being on a computer screen, being in front of a video game, being on our cell phones, or our neck bent forward. There's way too much technology usage going on right now, sitting in front of a television. All of that is actually more traumatic on our body than moving it too much. And the other thing that we often don't think about, and I'll chat a little bit about here later on as we go, traumatic is the birth process. Typically we're like, oh yeah, I was pregnant and the baby got here. And until somebody actually breaks down the birth process with you and shows you just exactly what can happen during that process and how it can trigger the fight or flight response, we don't even think about birth in this scheme of things at all, to be like, oh man, I didn't realize that this traumatic birth actually had an effect, having my child be more stuck in fight or flight and less resilient because their parasympathetic nervous system isn't engaged the way it should be. It didn't get, the replications that it needed. And now they're struggling more with illness and not knowing that their body's actually missing out on parasympathetic and what it needs to be able to recover there, which, as you know, adjustments help calm that down. And we can chat about that as well. So your HRV, this scan. So if you've been in my office before, you know this scan. You've seen this scan 1,000 times. And what we're really looking at and measuring is just exactly where your body is at internally. So are you stuck anything to the left in sympathetic or, and this is test taken at rest, or are you in parasympathetic? Now, really, once again, we want to be balanced between the two. We don't want to be stuck in fight or flight, because that means all of our whole nervous system, our filter and our lens is coming through an abnormal filter of stress. Everything is more perceived through that stress filter, and we start wiring ourselves that way, which we don't want to do. And especially while kids are making their neurological connections in their body, we definitely don't want to do that to them. And if we're over here in parasympathetic during the day, it tells us that we don't have any energy. We don't have the steam. We're probably chronically fatigued. We're a little bit more immobilized, because if you remember, when you're in parasympathetic, that motor system starts to turn off. You're forcing it on to be awake. your body's very, very tired and fatigued if it's over here. And when you're down this line, so this person's at 71%, battery life, we call an AAI, autonomic nervous system index, they don't have the capacity to fully function in fight or flight or parasympathetic. So they've experienced more stress in their lives than they have parasympathetic or resting and healing, and they start losing a battery charge. So at 71%, if you could charge your cell phone to 71% every day, you could use enough of the apps and you'd use it enough, but it's not 100%, right? You can't quite get everything you ask out of it. And it's the same thing inside of our body. Now our autonomic nervous system isn't quite getting what it needs. It doesn't have the energy it needs. And what we do is try to create our own energy, our own stimulation. We try doing it through, as you know, sugar, carbs, caffeine, any sort of quick stimulation to the brain, or we might just be mindlessly scrolling on our cell phones, hoping that something, funny stimulates us or some sort of good news story. Or maybe if you're wired for stress, like what can make me angry and just stimulate my body again? We're running on that adrenaline and that fight or flight. And the more we are draining that limited energy and the less we're in this parasympathetic, the more susceptible we are. And as we know, it's all about the host. I know this is not popular belief that we saw in 2020. We really wanted to examine the virus and just make everybody so susceptible to it. And what we found is that the host was key. We found out that it's an opportunistic infection, not that we weren't going to get it, but it was going to affect the host in different ways. And the body's capacity to fight it off was really, really indicative of their outcome from it. And this can be true, of course, in any virus and in any situation. The body needs the power to fight it. And what a lot of people also don't know is sometimes we're not setting ourselves up for success in our lifestyle, but we really don't set ourselves up for success in keeping our immune system balanced. So we might be way out of balance in our life, like fight or flight, everything's stress, there's way too much happening. I, eat toxic food and I, whatever, I'm a crap mess marriage and I yell at my kids all the time, whatever it is. Some people are just so fight or flight. Some people are like, I just have so much going on. I'm overwhelmed. I'm really tired. There's just, all these things happening, and they live in fight or flight, or some of them flip over, like I said, into parasympathetic, and they're fighting to get through the day, through the fog, through the fatigue, and their body is begging to heal. Either way, we're going to get an imbalance there and set ourselves up to have a struggle here in the immune system. But if we're not understanding the balance in our immune system and that it needs this is like such an important concept to understand, we're not going to have a chance when there is, well, we'll have a chance. I mean, the body's pretty amazing. But we're not setting ourselves up for success in the long run. That big picture that I'm talking about, when you're looking long-term on where you want your health, as your kids are growing and aging and you are as well, it's not going to be great if we don't set ourselves up for success here. So let me explain this a little bit more. And I know I've done a couple of Facebook Lives about this and understanding that your immune system has two modes of operation, just like your nervous system does. You've got your Th1 response, we call your firefighters, which I'm going to talk more about here in depth in just a moment. And then your Th2, which is more like your inspectors. And what often happens is if we start turning down one, which we usually do, turn down our Th1 response, our Th2 takes over. And Th2 is not something you want to get on in balance, because that's where you start to see the autoimmune conditions. That's when you start to see the body not responding, allowing foreign invaders to get in. And now this Th2 response, our over-inspecting immune system, is starting to take over. And this is really what we're seeing today, is a ton of autoimmune, a ton of fatigue, some of the things I'm going to talk about here in a little bit, and cancer, which is really a virus that's gotten in that the body didn't recognize. It's replicated in there. We see way too much of this today than we do too much Th1. So let me kind of explain to you how these work, because Th1, let me move forward here. There we go. Th1 is that side of your immune system that says, get it out. Something got in, red alert, call the firefighters, right? The house is burning down. They're just going to come in and start spraying, aren't they? They don't care where the fire started. Firefighters are going to come and just put the fire out. That is their job. That is just like TH1. They're like, get whatever got in out. And it comes in, any virus that you're exposed to should, unless you're injected with it, should come in through your eyes, ears, nose, skin, right? It's going to come through a portal of entry. So you've got a very generic immune system on your skin, lining your gut, in your eyes, ears, nose, throat. This is what you're going to get when you're talking about like coming through your mom's vaginal canal. This is that response. It doesn't necessarily recognize things for what they are. It just recognizes that it's bad and that it's killing things. So that's when you're going to start to see coughing. You're going to see fevers, inflammation, pus, mucus, rashes, coughing. This is the externalization, get it out. But what typically happens when we have this TH1 response, we're freaked out, right? We're like, oh my gosh, my kid has a rash, they've got a fever, they've got a cough, they've got diarrhea, they're not stopping. And we want to stop the symptom. So we want to turn down the TH1 response instead of allowing it to do its job, instead of building itself up. And once again, if TH1 isn't allowed to do its job, TH2 is going to take over. TH2 is going to go up. The inspectors that come in to say, all right, what happened here, right? Who's responsible for this mess? This is TH2. This is the guy that says, oh, we need to make some memory cells here, memory T cells to this invader so this doesn't happen again. We don't want these in anymore. Now, the next time that comes to enter in the body, we already have an army to fight it. Your TH2 is closely related to like those IgGs, the things you're going to get from your mom's placenta, the things that are crossing over the placenta into our babies. I know it's not a popular belief to think that a baby has an immune system these days, right? Because they are just completely over vaccinated. Because we're like, oh man, no, forget about it. They don't know how to fight off anything. And this TH2 response, our humoral, it's called the humoral response, isn't even turning on until they're about 6 months old to 18 months old. That's when it's going to start to develop. So, before that, to do that is just not a great idea. Anyways, your TH2, let me just move over to my next slide. Your TH2 is something that needs to be in balance with TH1. We don't want to overdo either one. We don't want a body that has, like overactive TH1. It is just like a fever all the time. Everything's everything's like vomiting, diarrhea all the time. And then TH2 is never acting. It never does anything. But we also don't want to constantly shut down this TH2 response or TH1 response. So TH2 is over inspecting and causing autoimmune. So here are things, and I'm going to try to move my little head out of the way here so you guys can read this, but things that are going to turn down TH1 are all the things that we give our kids. I know that I got as a child anytime we had a symptom, because we're thinking if the symptom's not there, it's better, but instead we're not allowing TH1 to do its job. We're not allowing it to have a natural cascade effect to alert TH2 and say, check out what happened here. I need some help so this doesn't happen again. And instead we're asking, once again, TH2 just to do everything. And that is not good. One of my, of course, favorite things to do and talk about is encouraging the TH1 response. So allowing the body to run its course. And this is to, of course, parent comfort level. If this is the first time you're hearing like, oh man, I shouldn't be doing these things to my kid, like turning off the symptoms, I don't know what to do, because we're told, for the most part, a fever is a bad thing. There's this magic number that the fever can't get over, or you need to immediately bring the baby in. I specifically remember the day I threw out my thermometer because I was taking my kid's temperature, and the number freaked me out because it had been told to me time and time again when I was a child, like, oh man, you don't want to get that fever high. And I had a mentor tell a story saying, hey, what happens when, you're out hiking in the woods and you're stranded and you've got a pot and a flame and a stream because you have no other water, right? Like, what are you going to do? You're going to collect the water in the pot, and then what are you going to do? You're going to drink it? No, you're going to boil it. Why are you going to boil it? Because it's going to kill everything. And he's like, wouldn't this be great if you had this innate response inside your body that it knew to heat things up to kill it? And you're kind of like, oh yeah, duh, right? Fevers can be a beautiful, wonderful thing. Its job is to kill. And while that's taking over, your body doesn't have time to eat and digest food. You're not hungry. It doesn't want to deal with anything else. Remember that limited energy where everyone's like, oh man, my kid hasn't eaten this amount of time. Well, their body's probably fighting something, and it's going to be okay. It doesn't want, you're going to interrupt the system if you're adding food to it often. And once again, go to your comfort level. And if this is the first time they're like, oh man, I'm constantly taking my kid's temperature and giving them, fever reducers, it's probably gonna be a lot harder for you. I specifically remember friends calling me like, are you sure it's okay? Is everything all right? I'm afraid it's this, it's this temperature. Yes. I would even come over and check the kid. They're responsive. They're hydrated. They're okay. Everything's going to be okay. And then dang it, once that fever broke on its own, beautiful things happened and the immune system was stronger, and they started kicking that cycle of constantly getting ill because they let the body do what it was innately designed to do, which is so amazing. And of course, I was adjusting the baby because we know that chiropractic adjustments stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, and that parasympathetic nervous system, I'm going to talk about here in a little bit, lies greatly in the vagus nerve and the prefrontal cortex, which we know are stimulated with a chiropractic adjustment. It actually helps put your lid on, calm the fight or flight response, engage the parasympathetic, let the body do a reset. It actually hits the right and left side of the brain together to reset and calm down. It's like a new filter and a new lens, a new way that your body can be in balance, or we call homeostasis. So really important things. And I know if you're on a phone, you might not be able to read all these things, so you can screenshot it. But I should also really, really mention, when your body's tired, whether or not you're actively ill and showing symptoms or not, rest is so important. Water is so important. I mean, if you do one thing in your life, if someone's like, what's the first thing I can do to change my life? Drink water. Drink enough water. It's so, so important just to do that. If you can get yourself and your kids and your spouse and whoever to drink enough water, man, magic can just really happen. I know it just seems like just such a simple concept. It's not always easy to get enough water in, but if you can do it, man, your life is going to be so much better. Here's what overactive TH2 looks like. If you have shut everything down that's externalizing and you keep everything inside, this internalization system with TH2, you usually are seeing just the dark circles under the eyes, which is why I gave this creepy kid a picture of this creepy kid. But it's the congested full sinuses, it's the swollen tonsils, adenoids, chronic ear infections, a constant runny nose because TH1 is so weak, it's always on, allergies, autoimmune conditions, chronic coughs, colds, viruses, infections, chronic fatigue, depression, and overactive microglia, which I'm going to cover here next. And it probably, unless you've watched my Interconnected or talked to me before, probably something you haven't heard that me talk about is the microglia in the brain, and what's actually happening in the brain when the body is having constant immune responses, and especially this overactive TH2, microglia get overactive. And microglia are this beautiful, wonderful, amazing cells inside of your brain that are part of your immune system. They actually used to be your white blood cells, travel up the vagus nerve to the brain at the 9th day of gestation. So baby's 9 days old in the belly, not 9 days old out of the womb. You get it, in utero. And they go to the brain. And they are the immune system inside of the brain. Now, this is a new discovery. When I was even in chiropractic school, we didn't know what microglia were. They would just say, here's the oligodendrocytes. They're telling you all the brain cells and microglia. And it's kind of like, that's what they are. They're just called microglia. We had no idea all of the concepts and all the amazing capabilities they had until very, very recently. And I'm talking like 2012 to 2020, when most of the discoveries on what microglia are, and you just neurotechnology in the brain and all the brain science that's happening right now with like functional MRI and all the things. So microglia travel around inside of the brain, and they become a beautiful, wonderful, they'll call them the angel or the assassin. When they're the angel, they're reinforcing beautiful pathways in the brain, and they're clipping off old ones, like horticulture, like we don't need this apple because it's going to take over the other apples, whatever they do in horticulture. But it's going to say, we don't need this pathway. It's actually not used. We're going to clip this off, and we're going to reinforce this beautiful pathway, and we're going to allow this gorgeous brain to develop. Well, when we are under chronic fight or flight, when we're under chronic stress, one thing in our body, in our immune system that's chronically on, remember I told you when you're under fight or flight, immune system turns down. Parasympathetic is down. The thing that turns up is your inflammatory response. You're highly inflamed. Why? Because when you're in fight or flight, your body's literally ready for a fight or a wound. If you're running, it's a good chance you're going to get cut, wounded, trip, fall. If you're going to fight, same thing. You're going to get hurt. Your body needs to quickly respond and heal it. That's what it's expecting to do. So you have a high inflammatory response when you're under chronic fight or flight and chronic stress. That chronic inflammation inside of the body is just absolutely too much for this microglia. There is a huge communication center, and it's that vagus nerve that I'm going to talk about between the gut and the brain and the internal organs and glands. That vagus nerve runs that parasympathetic, but also communicates with the brain. Those microglia will become overactive, and overactive microglia become assassins, and they start clipping off pathways that they shouldn't, and especially, unfortunately, even motor pathways to make people very lethargic, very tired. They can also, when I'm looking at overactive in the hippocampus, that's an area in the brain that's responsible for mood and memory. Now, let's take a look of long-term. I already talked about cancer and autoimmune conditions. Let's look at people with chronic mood and memory. Dementia is huge. It is absolutely rampant and early for women. Do you know early onset is 45 now to 52, which is absolutely ridiculous. Our brains just aren't healthy, and it typically is all of that stress. So I know a lot of us are like, man, I was just concerned about my kid. I didn't know I should be so worried about myself. We really need to take care of ourselves so we can be there for our kids and our grandkids and hopefully our great grandkids and have a healthy life and keep influencing them in positive ways. Because I know that's what you guys are all here to be able to do. But that inflammation, let me just show you a couple other things that ended up happening with inflammation in the brain when you have a smaller hippocampus with mood and memory, and we know it just starts to atrophy, meaning it starts decreasing in size. Left prefrontal cortex becomes overstimulated, and our vagal nerve tone is low, so our response to physiological stress is also inappropriate as well. So what will often happen, if you guys know anything about polyvagal nerve theory, and when we're looking at whether you're in your dorsal or your ventral, or whether you're stuck in fight or flight, or you're actually in the shutdown. So a lot of us can probably identify in either one. When we're stuck in fight or flight, what's going on? We're anxious, we're stressed, we're like heart's racing and are hot, we don't feel good, we're irritable, we don't have any tolerance for anybody. And when we're shut down, we're depressed, we're quiet, our bodies are tired, they're fatigued, they don't want to do anything, they're not moving well. And you'll start to see that vagal nerve tone is really low, and it's not compatible, and it's not consistent with what we need. And that fight or flight response, once again, can take over, and we just drain everything. If you want to take a little closer look, this is actually a slide from when I was talking about, behavior and focus and attention. So I stole this slide off of there, because when we're looking at what our prefrontal cortex is and what it does, That's our lid. So if you guys have seen my lid analogy, I do it 1,000 times. Our lid is our prefrontal cortex, where that parasympathetic nervous system lies, where reality lies. That's our executive functioning. This is prefrontal cortex, makes us human, helps us pre-plan, helps us goal set with compassion, long-term goals. It has on here decision-making. I mean, this prefrontal cortex, we know is not fully formed until about 25, but when it is disengaged, when we're in fight or flight, and the looser it is, we all know people that live with just like their lid is straight on off there. The amygdala is taking over. They're impulsive. They're reactive. They're constantly fight or flight. Well, there's people that just, parasympathetic's just not working well for them. They have a looser lid. They aren't able to fully engage in it. We don't have proper movement. Sensory, integration is off. Perception is off. Intelligence, typically more of a deficit there. Personality changes can start to occur where you just get really into that like type A person, or the person that is really withdrawn, but emotional response is off. We need the lid on in order to run both sides of our nervous system, in order to run our immune response, and for that microglia to be fully functional and not start to overrun the system. So as I said before, when you're getting adjusted, you're actually triggering that prefrontal cortex, the right and left side together. So refiring the brain, putting that lid back on, and allowing the body to communicate and calm itself down and start to regain that battery. That's why when you're starting to look at those HRVs, that box that I showed you before, when they start in the yellow, sometimes you'll even flip over to parasympathetic and start doing a bunch of healing before you go into the green box and be fully balanced and have a bunch of energy. And it's typically a process that occurs. And it can be a slow one, but how beautiful is it when we can get the body to be balanced, when we can measure the tone of the vagus nerve, which is really what that HRV is doing, and see that it can run the show appropriately, that the body truly is self-healing and self-regulating. It has to be given a better opportunity, and knowing just all of the things that we already talked about, knowing we want a balance in our lives. And if you need more information about helping your body move well, helping your body think better, and in avoiding toxins, and then allowing this process of the immune system. If you are stuck in something like that, or you're listening to this and like, oh, wow, I didn't know that my mood or my memory and all the things that you're telling me could be a response to stress, inflammation inside of my body, and my brain starting to make these errors, because we don't want is too many pathways clipped, because we'll start to see that not only in dementia, but our body's ability to communicate, all of the things that I just talked about with emotional response and psychological response inside of our bodies, and what not only we're telling ourselves, but what we're telling the world and how we communicate. So that's also part of what we're going to do on December 2nd with Gina Nelson, is go over how we're responding in each environment, and how to improve that, and really work up what we call the polyvagal nerve ladder to the top with the lid on, and how to really anchor to that and understand, here's where I need to bring myself to. That vagus nerve is so, so huge with that. If you've heard me, I mean, of course, I've been talking all about the vagus nerve, but knowing how much this gets stimulated and starts to come online with adjustments, but also if you're able to stimulate it on your own. So like deep breathing and essential oils, things that will start bringing that vagus nerve back online, is so, so important to make sure that that can have the right tone. Some of the research that I have on, some of my other slides as well, in my other PowerPoints, we look at studies in the vagus nerve and, how they've cut them. It's a science experiment, so I didn't do it, but cut them in rats and then examined what happened with the rats and how they didn't have any memory in their immune system and their inflammation. And then they reattached the vagus nerve, and the changes that were able to happen, that the rat could like relearn the maze or whatever they had, taught them to do. I mean, it's just crazy things, but also vagal nerve tone and sensory kids, where they're like, the vagus nerve, the low tone and the parasympathetic are, and the lower the tone, the more you're starting to see in the sensory responses to the kids and how they're responding to their world. And once again, we often see that it can start very, 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 very young, like the moment they come into the world, not knowing there's an imbalance in the nervous system, not knowing the vagus nerve can actually be damaged during the birth process, and being able to have that evaluated to get the body to restore itself to its very best capacity and capability is so encouraging, but something a lot of people need to hear about and know, because sometimes we just think we're stuck with what we're given. We're like, oh man, I just got this crappy immune system, and oh, I'm just so stressed. I'm just have such a stressful life, just who I am. I'm just wired for stress. We're really not, and you're not the best version of yourself when you're doing that and accepting that. So I'd encourage you to definitely, make some changes and start changing some of the beliefs. And even if it's baby steps, like drinking water, it's just something that you can do to become the best version of yourself. But some people need to hear this message, and they need to know that it doesn't have to be that way. And the body really is healthy. It's not something that you have to put in this sick cycle in the medical world of a constant pharmaceutical consumer, because we've seen how great that's done for us so far. The United States is the sickest nation here, and we're seeing it with our 2020 pandemic. It hasn't been fun, and I cannot wait to just influence more people to be healthier, to take their own, empower themselves and their families, to know that the host is key, and strengthening that host to be sure that you're healthy, you're happy, you're living your best life is so, so, so important to me. If you already aren't a patient, I'm going to move. We already know this. If you already aren't a patient, screenshot this or take a picture of this. This is a QR code to come in and get your scan. Normally they're $189. If it's a really complicated case, those are $300. This is for $100. So come in, get a scan, consultation with the doctor, and then you're not spending another dime until you look, get a plan, sit down with them and say, here's what's going on. Here's what's happening in your nervous system. Here's how you're responding to stress. Here's what it's going to take to help restore the body. And here's what it's going to, here's what the investment is going to be in time, money, energy, and help you move forward from that. And so I know many of you that are on here are patients, or your children are patients, and you haven't become a patient yet. Tell them that you've watched this, you've got that QR code, and they'll get you that for $100, and you will be off to the life that you deserve and help change the world for those who mean the world to you.